So just like my Korra video, I'm years late to the trend. Maybe not years this time, but I still want to talk about the Netflix live-action Avatar show because I just finished it. And to be honest, I was having trouble formulating my thoughts on this topic. It's hard to say overall how I feel about the show, to be honest. It would really oscillate between being good and being bad. There were different moments where I was like, hey, they're actually pulling this off pretty well, and then something would happen that made me really upset. And so I don't know if I could just talk about the show overall without sitting down and doing like an in-depth comparison of the live action to the original animated show, which I might do. I might save that though for once the show is complete and then just do a full analysis of both shows. But for now, we're gonna go the Watch Mojo route, and I figured that we would focus on the different changes that the show made when compared to the original show, because that's usually the biggest question people have with the live action remakes is what did they change? It's always a big issue of like, if they don't change anything, then why are you even making the live action? But then sometimes when they do change things, it's like, why did you change it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And with a show like Avatar that is pretty universally beloved and really doesn't have a lot of areas where there's like contention or like this part of the show really sucks. No, it's actually really good. That really doesn't happen a lot in the Avatar fandom, at least with the original show. Now, Legend of Korra does have a lot of moments where people feel very divided on whether it's good or bad. So maybe a Korra live action is actually in order. I really think it could improve the show. But for now, Netflix had to stick with their cash cow. They decided to make Avatar live action again. Apparently they learned nothing from what M. Night Shyamalan did, and they decided to make some changes. And they made a good bit of changes. It's a very different show compared to the original. And in principle, I respect that, because if you're gonna bother making an entire multi-million-dollar live action remake of an original show, then don't just give me the same show. I want you to try something new. And hey, maybe it sucks, or maybe it'll be good. And that's kind of the point of this video. Let's give a nice mix of praise and criticism. Trust me, I don't want to be a hater, but there are some changes that were made to this show that were really, really bad. So we can give credit where credit is due, but there is no growth without pain. I think Iroh said that at one point or something, so it's gotta be correct. Let's start off with the positives though. Let's talk about the top 3 good changes. Starting off with the third best change that they made, combining the Mechanist and Teo with Jet's storyline. Now, the entire live action show, it feels kind of rushed in a lot of ways. Even though the runtime I think is pretty similar to the runtime of the original show, I think it's because they're trying to be more dramatic and serious. They go really slow on certain moments that don't necessarily need to be that slow, and so they end up being rushed for time in a lot of ways, and there are a lot of things from the original book 1 of the show that get cut in this show. But I will say this was one change that was not only a good use of being more time efficient, but also I think improved the original story in some respects. Because as a concept, smashing together the Mechanist and Teo storyline with Jet's storyline seems kind of dumb. They just seem like very different characters, and like they're exploring very different things within the story, that kind of smashing them together in one episode, I feel like it would detract from both of them. But I think the way that the live action pulled it off actually worked pretty well. With this change, now instead of Jet just destroying some random village, he actually targets the Mechanist and Teo because the Mechanist is revealed to be working with Fire Nation spies in order to support his son. And so I think that raises the stakes in a lot of ways, because not only in the show have we gotten to know the Mechanists and Teo and gotten to like them and care for them, so now it really hurts to see that Jet is going to attack them. There's also kind of a more complex morality to it, because now the Mechanist has betrayed the Earth Kingdom. He has done something pretty terrible, but we understand that he does have sympathetic reasons for what he did. And that's kind of all I really have to say about it. So I didn't find this change to be particularly spectacular or anything. It was more so like, oh, that's kind of a neat interpretation and a good way to make the storytelling more efficient, since it seemed like the live action was pressed for time in a lot of circumstances. And it just kind of heightened the emotions of the situation all around, because now we have a lot more personal investment instead of just this random village is going to die, which is still sad, but seeing it connected to this character that we've gotten to know deeply and gotten to know his family situation and how he's in this difficult conflict where he wants to stay true to his morals, but he also feels a need to protect his son. It just makes the whole situation a lot more tense and dramatic, and so I thought that was a pretty cool change for them to make. That one was pretty short, I know, but to be honest, it wasn't that big of a change. And now for the second best change that the live action made, Sokka's flashback to failing his test in the spirit world. So I will get into this point later when we talk about the bad changes, but for some reason this show insists that Sokka's like an inventor, and that's kind of his character arc this time, is that he wants to be an inventor, but I guess somebody was like, that's dumb. For the majority, I feel like Sokka's arc is kind of lame in the live action. It's not as good as the original. But this is one change that I thought was a pretty good change to Sokka's arc. And it's especially confusing considering how Sokka's arc plays out in the show, because throughout the show, they're trying to emphasize that his struggle is not that he doesn't know how to be a leader and he needs to grow up and mature and realize that being a leader is more than just being aggressive and telling people what to do. It's about understanding how to motivate people in the darkest of times and how to keep on a brave face even when everything is falling around you, and how that really takes a lot of strength of character. It's not just about being, you know, manly and tough. That's what I feel Sokka's arc in the original show represents. In the live action, they don't go that route for some reason, even though I think that's a pretty solid arc to have for Sokka. Instead, they make it about that he wants to be an inventor, or he has this like innate inventing ability, and his struggle is about the fact that somebody discouraged him from doing this. I'm not sure who. Maybe it was just like the cultural pressure to be a warrior and a leader. I don't know, but that's part of the criticism. Let's focus on the positives right now. So this scene does feel out of place considering Sokka's new character arc in the live action, but it actually does fit in well, I think, to Sokka's original arc in the animated show. Basically, they changed the episodes around a bit, and so Katara and Sokka are like wandering through the spirit world, and they each have bad flashbacks.
Yeah, I can deal with the truth. What I can't deal with is getting eaten by some giant spirit monster.
Obviously, Katara has a bad flashback to when her mom died, but Sokka's painful flashback is to, I think he's performing like some kind of test. He's doing some kind of rite of passage for the men in the village and performing a test, and he doesn't do well on it, and he overhears his dad and his dad's brother, Hakoda, I believe. He overhears the two of them talking about Sokka's performance, and his dad basically says that he thinks Sokka is a failure, and he wouldn't have passed the test if Hakoda hadn't come in and helped out at the end. So yeah, it's a pretty sad scene, and you feel really bad for Sokka. You can tell that this really hurts him, and I actually appreciated this change a lot, because I do think in the original show, compared to Katara and Aang, we don't get as many moments seeing Sokka feel vulnerable or really wrestle with trying to be a leader. I think it more so comes up in the later seasons, like the episode where he learns to sword fight, but in the earlier seasons, Sokka is more so comic relief. He doesn't get as many moments to be vulnerable as Katara and Aang. He still does have a lot of important moments that build his character in those seasons, but I do appreciate a scene like this because I think it shows us that Sokka isn't invincible. He isn't always just laughing things off, and he isn't always able to just clap back at people whenever they're criticizing him or making him feel bad about himself. At least in the context of the live action, it's a moment of genuine hurt and weakness for Sokka that we don't get to see a lot in the live action, and we still don't get to see as much in the original animated series, I would argue. So I think a scene like this really helped the live action, and I think it would have been a nice addition to the original. I don't think it's super vital to the original, considering that we do already get a lot of scenes solidifying Sokka's arc and building to his journey to become a leader, but I think it's a cool moment of vulnerability to see for Sokka, and to see how the pressures that are coming from the older men within his village are really getting to him, and he really puts a lot of this pressure on himself to perform and be the great leader that everybody wants him to be, but he doesn't understand what that actually means. So I felt that overall this scene was a welcome addition to the live action, and a good moment to shine a light on some of the internal struggles that Sokka has that we don't always get to see because he's so busy being the meat and sarcasm guy. So I thought that was a nice scene for them to add. And now for number 1, the best change that the live action made was showing Lu Ten's funeral. I'm not a masochist. The main reason that I enjoyed this scene is not only did it give us a deeper look into Iroh's grief and how he felt in that moment of knowing that his son is now dead, but I think within the live action it actually did more service to Zuko's character, and it really showed that powerful kindness and compassion that drives him. Within the live action, this scene was just beautifully made all around, some of the best acting within the series, and the orchestral arrangement of Leaves from the Vine is gorgeous. Oh gosh, I mean, just hearing that alone can make somebody cry. But beyond that, there's this really beautiful moment within the funeral when Zuko comes up to Iroh, and they contrast his response to Iroh with Ozai's response. At first, Zuko comes up and he gives his general, respects, saying that Liu Ten's gonna be honored as a hero and you should feel grateful for that, which is basically what Ozai does. Not a lot of compassion coming from Ozai, obviously. But just as he's about to walk off, Zuko stops himself and he shows Iroh a gift that Liu Ten gave him. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's like some kind of lucky charm thing. Just a sign of kindness from Liu Ten, trying to encourage Zuko and tell him that he's going to be a great warrior one day. And Zuko shares this with Iroh to try to console him and show him how much Liu Ten meant to him as a person. Not just what did Liu Ten do for the Fire Nation, but what did Liu Ten do for Zuko that really impacted him. And instead of walking off like everybody else has, Zuko sits down to be with Iroh and to sit with him during this moment of grief. And it's just a really beautiful image, and it really shows the compassion that's at the core of their relationship and how the kindness that they show to each other is what makes them both better people, but especially Zuko. Throughout season 1, Zuko kind of sucks. He just seems like this angry teenager who just wants to be mean to Aang for no reason. And so I felt that this moment in the live action was in similar vein to Aang and Zuko's conversation after Aang finds out that he's the Blue Spirit. It's just a moment to show the viewers that despite what we may think of Zuko, his true self is driven by an empathy for other people, and he has a great capacity to be empathetic and supportive of others. It's just been crushed down by his father and his sister and the Fire Nation society as a whole, which has taught him that that's weak and that's not something that he should encourage or nurture within himself. So not only was the Liu Ten funeral just a kind of fan servicey scene to get everybody in their feels and stuff about Iroh, but it actually had a lot of character depth, and it was one of the best moments of the live action in my opinion. My only recommendation is that maybe this scene should have been saved for book 2. I think it's just a little early to be humanizing Iroh and Zuko to such an extreme extent, because the viewers are supposed to kind of go along a journey with the main characters and realizing that the people of the Fire Nation aren't all just pure evil, and they aren't all just people that we need to defeat in a battle. And so it's important that for season 1, Iroh and Zuko just seem like standard antagonists, and so we get some looks into their inner psychology, but we don't have those really humanizing moments until season 2, when Zuko and Iroh start actively going against the Fire Nation. So maybe they jumped the gun with this scene a little bit, but otherwise, it was a really beautiful scene. I really enjoyed it, and I think it was the best change that the live action made. And now we cannot ignore the elephants in the room any longer. It's time to talk about the top 3 worst changes that the live action made. Starting off with the third worst change that the live action made, making Katara a warrior and Sokka an inventor. Katara and Sokka are the first introduced characters in the show, so their arcs are very carefully crafted throughout the 3 seasons. And for some reason, the live action was like, those aren't good enough, and they decided to change them in very fundamental ways, which I really just don't understand. And now we just have these slightly lamer versions of Katara and Sokka that I really doubt are going to live up to the iconic characters that they are in the original animated show. Within the show, it's really emphasized that Katara is a waterbender, and for some reason they make it all about she's just born a waterbender, she's innately good at waterbending, and the only thing that's holding her back is mean people and sexist Paku or whatever. Of course, I'm not denying Katara is one of the most powerful waterbenders that we see in the show, but her strength does not come from just being born a waterbender and wanting to be a warrior and fight people. It's much more interesting than that. I mean, Katara represents hope. It's pretty obvious within the show, but she has this incredible ability to stand strong and keep going even when things seem completely hopeless, and it really has a powerful effect on the other members of Team Avatar. And some of Katara's most interesting moments within the original show are not about her learning to be a better waterbender because it's cool to watch her unlock epic waterbending abilities. One of the most impactful Katara moments, which I would argue is whenever she confronts the man that killed her mom, it's about her emotional strength in that moment to be able to say that she's going to stand up for what she believes in and do what she believes is the good and right thing to do, which is not to promote further violence and vengeance, but to forgive and to move on and create a better world in spite of the people that are trying to make her life worse. And so why the show places such an emphasis on Katara just getting an XP boost and being a better waterbender really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's much more about her emotional growth and being able to confront like pure evil and pure darkness head on and still come out with a positive attitude and a fighting spirit. I already touched a bit on my criticisms for Sokka in the praise section. I'm really sorry guys, I'm trying to be more positive. And they're actually pretty similar to my criticisms with Katara. He also is just like born with STEM abilities for some reason and is a really good inventor. And the problem isn't that he needs to change, it's that other people need to just let him do what he's good at and let him be an inventor. It's such a boring character arc compared to what we get in the original show. There's no personal challenge for Sokka in the sense that there's no like forcing him to reconsider what he believes or pushing him to his limits and seeing if he can stand up for his principles even in a dire situation. No, it's just like he's good at inventing and he needs to learn to embrace that and believe in himself, I guess. It's so basic. I don't understand why you would change the original show, which has a really interesting character arc for Sokka about challenging the traditional conception of what a hero is and what a strong, powerful man is, and having Sokka learn that it's so much more than that. Instead, just making him like good at inventing, and if he can just like join a STEM program or something, he'll be good. This is the third worst change, so it wasn't show ruining for me, but it was just definitely a disappointment because Katara and Sokka's arcs are very well handled in the original show. I don't know why you would change something that's so important to their characters like that. Alright, the second worst change. Zhao's lame character and stupid death. I know I sound more aggressive, but that's what I wrote, so that's what you're getting. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion within the Avatar fandom, but I just have a huge soft spot for Zhao. I really like him as a book 1 antagonist. I think if he'd stayed beyond that, it would have been lame, he would have overstayed his welcome, but the way that he's implemented in book 1 is really well done in my opinion. I think in some ways he just seems like your standard cartoon villain. He's brash and arrogant, he thinks he's better than everybody else, he's a hothead, and he seems very cliche in that he's like a big mean adult for Aang to come and like be cool and stick it to him and show him that kids can do anything. But as the original Avatar show does, they love to take cliche concepts and make them so much more interesting, and I feel like they definitely accomplished that with Zhao. The thing is, he is arrogant, he has a big head, and he overestimates himself a lot. He's not completely incompetent. He can be very threatening when he doesn't let his ego get in the way, and that's the scariest thing about him, is that he really has no bounds. We never see him feel a moment of guilt or like questioning himself. He always thinks that he's in the right, and he's willing to do anything to advance his own glory and the Fire Nation's glory as a whole. So while at first he just seems like your standard, you know, lower rank lackey, this hot-headed guy who thinks he knows what he's doing and just bulldozes his way through everything, he's actually very cunning and very threatening, and that fact becomes very apparent in the book 1 finale, The Siege of the Northern Tribe. And the way that this was handled in the live-action show, especially with Zhao's character, it was very disappointing. First of all, I did not like the actor for Zhao in the live action. I think part of the reason I love Zhao so much in the original show is that he has a really good voice performance. He's so smarmy and like stuck up, but not in an overly comedic way.
That's quite a bit of damage.
The live action Zhao feels like a frat bro. He feels like a Barbie villain. Bro thinks that he's that one Homelander meme, but he's just so goofy. He's not intimidating. I mean, I don't know if it's just the way that this man is, and like, I'm sorry to make fun of you, man. I don't feel scared of him at all. I think it's part performance, part physicality. It's just, I want my Zhao back! I want it back! I was not happy with the live action performance. But hey, it's not even all the actor's fault because the writing doesn't do Zhao much justice either, and Zhao's final moments especially were the final straw for me. They really ruined it. I don't know why they decided to change so many things about it, because a character's final moments are sometimes, and especially in Zhao's case, they're most important. Zhao's death is a classic lesson about hubris and arrogance, and about tempering with nature and the spirits. That's like a core theme of Avatar, and Zhao exemplifies it perfectly, and within the show they just decided to change it because apparently they thought they knew best and they thought that they could just mess with my boy Zhao. So within Zhao's final moments, it starts off pretty normal because they have Zuko confront Zhao. Zhao found out that Zuko was the blue spirit and he tried to get him. exiled for that. But within this confrontation, Zhao reveals to Zuko that apparently Azula has been helping him this entire time from back in the Fire Nation, and she like sent him these elite archers, and she was the one that saw Zuko's swords as the blue spirit was like, yeah, that's Zuko. So first of all, that makes Zhao seem extremely incompetent. He was just relying on a 14-year-old girl like the whole time. And it's also really strange that they put that in because they try to make like Zuko feel bad about it for some reason, when I'm like, the guy has enough to feel bad about already. I think that he already has a complex about Azula and his father. That's made pretty clear within the original show. I don't know why they added this twist. It didn't really improve anything. So that moment was weird. But then Zhao's death scene was completely ridiculous. The original show has such an iconic death for Zhao. I believe it's the ocean spirit, the big fish thing. The big fish thing comes up and grabs Zhao and he's gonna drown him. It's this really amazing like wrath of the spirits moment where he's gonna kill Zhao for his hubris. And not only is that moment just very epic and grandiose, but also filled with dramatic irony for Zhao, there's still a moment in there for Zuko. Because despite fighting Zhao for the past like 3 minutes and trying to kill him, as Zhao is being dragged off by the spirit, you know, the perfect moment for Zuko to just be like, okay, see ya, sucker. Zuko does something really unexpected and he reaches out his hand and he tries to help Zhao and tries to save him. It's a very complex moment and I think it can mean a lot of things for Zuko. I feel like primarily it's indicating that at a fault, Zuko has deep compassion for other people and he's not as merciless and cruel as the Fire Nation is trying to make him. Yes, he fights Zhao. Yes, he does try to kill him in that moment, but Zuko would never actually kill Zhao. He's just blowing off steam. That's not who he actually is. That's just who the Fire Nation is trying to make him. And so this moment is incredibly revealing for his character. And I think in some ways it also shows that Zuko still deeply respects the Fire Nation. And even though he did commit a little bit of treason by stealing the Avatar, he still feels a really deep sense of respect for the Fire Nation leaders and still feels like he's beneath them. And so this is one of many moments in the original show that is kind of representing Zuko's internal battle for the audience in a physical way. But in that moment, even though Zuko reaches out his hand, Zhao doesn't accept it, and so he goes into the water and he's never seen again until Korra, and then he's also never seen again. It's one final moment of hubris for Zhao. He angered the spirits and he's getting what's coming to him, and even in that moment where he's given a way out, he won't accept Zuko's help because he's so proud and so full of himself that he thinks, I would never humble myself to accept the assistance of a traitor like Zuko. It's just a really cool way for a villain to go out. It's why I love Zhao. I mean, it's just fun to watch an arrogant and smarmy villain like be snarky towards everyone, but Zhao goes beyond that. He's a cautionary tale in a really powerful way, and I've been talking about Zhao for a long time. And so now we get to the live actions rendition of things. It starts out the same. Zuko confronts Zhao, they start fighting. Zhao reveals that Azula was the one who helped him the whole time for some stupid reason, and then there's a moment where Zuko turns his back on Zhao. He decides not to kill Zhao. So hey, that's not bad. That does still reflect Zuko's character. But then, hold on, we still gotta assassinate somebody's character. So Zhao decides that he's gonna get one last hit on Zuko and he's about to kill him, and Iroh runs in and kills Zhao. Iroh launches a giant fireball at him and Zhao falls off the bridge that they were on, and he's dead. He's burnt to a crisp. And Iroh and Zuko kind of stare at the corpse for a moment, and then Iroh's just like, alright, let's go.
Come, nephew. That's quite a bit of damage.
It feels so stupid compared to the original. One, we missed the cool moment with the spirit coming and killing Zhao. That was a great moment of like divine vengeance against Zhao for messing with the spirits. And two, why did we have to make Iroh come and kill Zhao? I know that in the moment, Iroh was trying to defend Zuko, trying to save his life, but this is something that I felt throughout the whole live action, to be honest, is that they made Iroh too aggressive. He loses his temper a lot more often in this version of the show. The thing is, in the original show, Iroh's just a silly, goofy guy a lot of the times. He acts kind of stupid almost. Like,
it's time to leave! Where are you? Uncle Iroh!
Over here.
uncle?
He makes a lot of seemingly dumb decisions, and they kind of play him off as being a wacky old man. And so it emphasizes it even more whenever Iroh gets actually mad at someone and tries to fight someone. You know that this person is bad news because Iroh is such a wholesome, peaceful guy who is able to see the best in some of the worst people and get along with some of the most frustrating people, that if somebody's bad enough to make Iroh angry, you are dealing with a very corrupt, evil person. And so for Iroh to just kind of nonchalantly and quickly kill someone like this, I think really goes against his character, against what he stands for, and it takes away the impact of his character and what he's supposed to teach the audience about empathy and trying to find the best in everyone. Yes, in the original show, Iroh gets mad at Zhao, and I think they do the scene well whenever Iroh confronts Zhao when he's about to kill the moon spirit. That's a good example of Iroh being angry, and it makes sense. Having him just randomly run up and kill Zhao and then just kind of nonchalantly walk away, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for his character, and it makes him seem like he'll just kind of kill people whenever he has a personal grudge against them. If you're gonna change a character's death scene, and especially a major antagonist of the first season, if you're gonna change how their death scene plays out, you better think carefully about it, and the writers did not. This is a very throwaway death. It made Zhao look stupid. It wasn't as powerful for Zuko as it was in the original show, and it made Iroh just look kind of like a violent maniac. But that was only change number 2. Now we are getting to change number 1, what I thought was the worst change of the show because it impacted a very important character within the show: the inclusion of Azula in season 1. Now, as a concept, I was gonna say I don't have problems with including Azula in season 1 as a concept, but I actually do. Building up Azula in the background throughout season 1 and then unleashing her out into the world for season 2 is a really smart choice for the original show to make. I mean, it builds up the intimidation and the suspense. The mystery and unknown surrounding her makes her much more intimidating because we don't know what this girl is fully capable of. All we know is that Zuko fears her, and Zuko's a pretty fearsome foe, so that is a bad sign for us, and it makes her presence as a villain in season 2 a lot stronger. So not only is not showing Azula in season 1 helping with the intimidation factor, but it really helps with her character arc and the way that the audience perceives her, in my opinion. A lot of the villains of Avatar get humanizing moments. Zuko and Iroh throughout season 1, and especially in season 2, we get to see a much more vulnerable human side of them. Azula just doesn't get as many humanizing moments, and we don't really see more beyond the persona that she's this master manipulator and everybody fears her and she can just control whoever she wants. There aren't that many major moments where we see vulnerability to Azula. What I can think of off the top of my head is like her training scene on the boat where we have almost isn't good enough. That's showing a crack in Azula's facade, but I would say we don't get the biggest look into who she is until we get the beach episode and the scene around the campfire, where we do realize that Azula's mother calling her a monster actually hurt her. And I think that's one of the first moments where we actually see Azula feeling hurt by the way that someone else perceives her. And then of course things escalate dramatically whenever May betrays her, and that's kind of the major crack in Azula's psychology. And then of course Ozai betrays her and leaves her behind in order to finish his conquest of the world, and that's when she really snaps and she goes crazy, and we all know what happens there. The show is much more selective in showing quote-unquote humanizing moments for Azula than it is with Zuko and Iroh. And the show does something really cool, where it establishes these truths about Azula that she believes about herself, and thus the audience comes to believe this about Azula as well. Because we don't get to see into her inner psychology, we also believe that Azula is unstoppable, that she can dominate anyone, that no one would ever betray her, and that her dad respects her and believes that she is a great warrior for the Fire Nation. These truths go largely unchallenged until we get to the end of book 3, when we see at the campfire that Azula can be hurt by the words of others, when May betrays her, and when Ozai leaves her behind and basically treats her as worthlessly as he did with Zuko. And the way that it's set up allows the audience to experience these moments with Azula, because we had the same perceptions that she has about herself, and so we're watching them get shattered along with her. And so it makes her eventual descent into madness and seeing her just become a sobbing mess and nowhere near the intimidating force that she once was. It hurts so much more because up until that point, nobody would ever believe that could happen to Azula. She just was unstoppable. We believed with Zuko that she was lucky to be born, you know? She was the golden child. And so showing restraint and then at the end putting little cracks in Azula until she's just completely broken the way that the original show does, it makes her downfall so much more emotional and impactful. Meanwhile, we get to the live action. The live action feels the need to include not only Azula, but Mei and Ty Lee and Ozai, and we get up close and personal with them a lot. And I don't know why, other than fan service, and that fans love the Fire Nation, and they find the Fire Nation very interesting. And the dynamics within Ozai's family are like endlessly talked about within the fandom. So I guess the show creators were just like, let's put more of that in there. People love that. But they didn't stop and think about the effect that would have. Where are my notes? I can't find my notes. Okay. Within the live action, we get these various training scenes that Azula has where Ozai keeps pushing her. We already get cracks within Azula's persona. In the first season, as we're just meeting her, they humanize her too much. We see her be vulnerable. We see her cry and be like hurt by Ozai's words. No one is supposed to see that. Somehow Mei and Ty Lee, I guess, like took a class on parental abuse or something, and they very clearly recognize that Ozai is manipulating Azula and just trying to push her and is like cruelly subjecting her to these training matches over and over and then telling her that she's still not good enough and he's just manipulating her. And I don't really understand how these like teenage girls recognize this so easily, especially considering they were raised in the Fire Nation, which values like cruelty and discipline and hard work above everything else. I really don't know how they have an in-depth understanding about the complexities of parenting and golden child syndrome and stuff like that. So the show depicts them as being able to see past Ozai's manipulation, and it also depicts Azula as like being terrified of her father and feeling like vulnerable anytime that he criticizes her or tells her that she's not good enough. This kind of stuff cannot happen this early in the show. You're taking away the kind of mystery and unknown and intimidation around Azula, and you're making her just a vulnerable teenage girl who can be hurt by others, who does feel pain whenever her dad is mean to her. It's too early for us to know that as an audience yet. We need to buy into Azula's persona the way that she buys into her own view of herself, that she's a firebending prodigy, that she's her dad's favorite, that her dad loves and praises everything she does and she can always meet his expectations and he's never going to be disappointed in her. That's very important for Azula's psychotic break at the end, and it's a very important parallel to Zuko's character. We see that Azula being constantly touted as a firebending master and this heartless master manipulator who can lay waste to like the entirety of Ba Sing Se. This is the image of her that we're supposed to believe in as an audience. Not that I'm saying that Zuko didn't have a tough life or that Azula's life was easier, but him being banished from the Fire Nation was actually kind of a gift because it allowed him to be vulnerable and it allowed him to realize that he doesn't actually believe in what his father says about him. Meanwhile, Azula's growth into this evil person is part Ozai molding her into that and part her buying into it and believing it fully. If in the live action show they depict her as being hurt by Ozai and being frustrated with Ozai and not fully respecting him and revering him, it's already showing Azula as not the Fire Nation's most loyal soldier, and it's really gonna hurt her arc in the end. It just feels like the creators are going out of their way to make her like sympathetic and tragic and stuff, but the tragedy of Azula's character hits harder because we thought that she was just a mindlessly evil villain in the first 2 seasons, and so it hits even harder to see her break in book 3 because what we thought were these foundational truths about Azula were really just built on lies. So this was one change that I really actively disliked. It felt just fan servicey. It felt like an Azula fan was on the writing staff and was like, she's my baby girl and we have to show how much she's been hurt by Ozai. The original show does a spectacular job at doing that already, and it doesn't need to jump the gun and right from the start make us feel bad for Azula. That's how Zuko's arc unfolds. It's not how Azula's arc unfolds. And we don't need these scenes vying for sympathy from the audience about Azula and she's just a young teenage girl, like you should feel bad for her. I already do. Like, trust your audience to have the maturity to understand Azula's perspective and already feel bad for her, especially as the last season unfolds. I did like her actress. I think her actress did the best that she could with the material, but the writing really failed her, and her inclusion all around was just a bad idea in my opinion. They should have showed some restraint and waited until season 2 to include her. So I don't know how long this video is going to be. I get a feeling though that the negative side of this video is probably going to be longer, and overall I did feel dissatisfied with the live action. I wouldn't say it was a complete waste of time. It wasn't a complete dumpster fire. But this was a criticism that I saw a lot of people having online. Overall, the show it doesn't feel like Avatar, and it feels like it's taking itself way too seriously and trying way too hard to be dark and mature. They literally open with like a horrific scene of the attack on the Air Nomad temple. Like, this was not necessary to depict the Air Nomads being massacred in brutal detail. Seeing Aang's reaction to Monk Gyatso's corpse is emotional enough, and I think it's one of those things where the original Avatar had to deal with the restraints of being a kids show and not being able to depict anything too dark or violent, and so it was almost a suggestion of darkness in the midst of this lighthearted kids adventure show that I think made it even more impactful. As much as I said I loved Lu Ten's funeral scene, the way that the original show portrays it with more subtlety and having Iroh go and just quietly mourn his son, it paints an entirely different image of him that we'd had throughout the show, where he just seemed like this wacky old man character and a kind mentor to Zuko. It's such a gut punch to have suddenly be shown, oh yeah, he was kind of responsible for his son's death. That's extremely dark, but we don't even need to go into that much detail about it. Just that thought alone, just briefly showing that, gives us a small glimpse into the inner turmoil that Iroh is dealing with in a way that I feel is almost more impactful, because it just lets us sit in that moment and just feel solemn, and it lets us think about what are some of the deeper things that Iroh is going through that we don't really take notice of. Meanwhile, the show seems like it wants to delve into all of the angst and darkness of Avatar the Last Airbender, when I feel like it's that contrast between it a lot of the times being a lighthearted kids adventure show, and then sometimes being about very dark and heavy subjects that makes the sad moments hit so much harder, because it kind of lulls us into a sense of, oh, this is just a fun fantasy adventure, only to be then reminded of the disastrous effects that all of this warfare and violence has had on everybody involved. And I think maybe it's a problem with the way people talk about Avatar online. People love to have discourse about like Ozai's family, about Katara and Zuko and their life-changing adventure. And I think the writers of the live-action show saw that and thought, oh, that's what people are really interested in the show. Let's put more of that in there. But they lost the charm of Avatar. They lost kind of the spirit of the show. You just don't really buy that Katara, Sokka, and Aang are very close friends and almost like a family whenever you watch the live action, because they barely spend any time together. They keep getting sent off on side quests and they don't get to just go on adventures together, because that's a waste of time. We have to keep going to the overarching narrative of saving the world. We can have Aang go like ride on eels, or we can have a pirate adventure, even though those moments were incredibly important in building the bond of the gang. The show just seems obsessed with the Game of Thrones aspects of Avatar and going into those very dark, dramatic scenes and really emphasizing that. And in doing that, they made a lot of changes, some good, some really, really bad, and they kind of lost the spirit of Avatar. Despite all this, I am curious to see how the second season of the live action will go. Hopefully it'll get better. I'm a little bit doubtful, but hopefully they'll listen to some of the feedback they've gotten. Maybe it'll get better. I hope it does, because there are parts of this that are really cool. It is just kind of fun in some ways to watch Avatar be made in live action. I think while some of the cast's acting abilities are pretty weak, I think a lot of the cast members are very likable, and I think they could have a really interesting and engaging interpretation of the Avatar characters.
They're not able to announce a season 2 because they would like to announce season 2 and 3.
So I will be awaiting season 2 with bated breath. Hopefully I won't have to make another one of these videos where I complain for a long time. Overall, while I don't want the live action to stick to the letter of what the original show did, I just hope they think through these changes a little more carefully and think about the ripple effects that they might have before they just rewrite the whole story. Let me know what you guys thought of the live action down in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe for more epic top 10 videos, and we'll see you all next time. Bye!